This video is going to be fast and informative. Question 1. Why is AQA changing it? Because nearly everyone in the country got 4 out of 4 marks. It was therefore a pointless question. Now it is going to be a multiple choice, which means some students at last will get it wrong because they're not very good at reading, which is fair, and also it's going to be much quicker to mark, so AQA can make more profit. What impact will that have? It's a better question. Love it. Question 3 is the structure question. It's the question that historically has been the worst in the history of this exam. That is why AQA are changing it. Instead of having the changes of focus, which seem to me very easy, they've now decided to give you one thing to write about. Call it tension, anxiety, excitement. Whatever it is, the examiners will choose one thing. That sounds brilliant. However, in the bullet points, they then add other sorts of ideas like perspective, atmosphere, mood. This is going to be much more tricky, and it isn't at all clear whether or not you have to use those words. So, in the first time through, make sure you use those words. This change is going to have a big impact. It makes the question a lot more of a lottery. You're not really sure what you're going to have to write. Luckily, I'm going to give you lots of examples of what to write in the description. Paper 1, question 4 has always been the most difficult. It's worth 20 marks, which is huge. The other problem with the question is that it began with this made-up student statement. And then there was the problem with the statement itself, which often had 3 or 4 parts to it. On the one hand, that was a godsend. Write about those 3 or 4 parts and you would rack up the marks. But on the other hand, it was a lot to think about, and average students and below average students were going, I'm lost. Now, how have they improved it? What have they done? They've now simplified the statement so that it makes sense. It'll have 2 ideas in it, and you can think about both. And then it has a very simple question. Instead of, to what extent do you agree? It says, to what extent do you agree or disagree? This was because, going back to the why, loads of students were thinking, I've just got to agree. And in the mark schemes, all the exemplars were full of, you mainly agree. Now the examiners are saying, no, we're going to release you and allow you to disagree if you want. This is a better change. The problem with the impact is that you still have to get 20 marks, and this doesn't force students to write enough to get them. So it's not so awesome unless you know how to write loads. If you want to see examples of student responses to question 3 and question 4, they're in the description. Question 5. This is the most important change because it carries most of the marks of the paper. What is the thing that they're trying to cure? Too many students, A, writing the description question, B, writing pointless description, which is horrible and rubbish and not what real writers do, and C, students not learning how to write stories. So, AQA have said, look, you can describe if you want to, but here is a picture and you do not have to use it. You can just use your imagination. This is liberating for creative students, and for students who aren't creative, they can go, I'll just use the picture, thank you very much. But also, they have made the story so much easier. Your story no longer has to have an ending, and that is the most difficult thing to do under exam pressure. Now, it just has to be the beginning of a story. Think of it like the first chapter of a book. Can you use a cliffhanger? Yes, you can. Do you need a properly crafted ending? No, you don't. You just need a reason for the reader to want to get to the next chapter. Or you can write a full story that would be the first chapter of a novel, and then we'd find out what happens next. This is a gift. The impact is awesome, and I hope loads of schools and students will think, I'm going to write a story. But you don't have to. Also, and this bit is super cool, the mark scheme is now split. Description is slightly different to narrative. And the big difference is, in the narrative, you're no longer marked for descriptive techniques. Yes, you don't have to just chuck in loads of old rubbish for the examiner. You can write a proper story. Result. Who is to paper 2. Question 2 of paper 2 was a horrible summary question. Why was that horrible? Because first you had to write a summary, then it was of what you understand, and then it was of a specific thing in the 2 passages. Loads of things to remember. What the hell is a summary anyway? Isn't a summary just summarising what's in the whole text? The question baffled. But now you no longer have to write a summary. You just have to compare the 2 texts, and the question will ask you to look at the one single thing. Much easier to focus on, much easier to get right, much easier. Thank you, AQA. Oh, and it's also a better test of how good you are at English rather than understanding all little bits of the question. Result. Question 4 of paper 2 is the most important change because it is a 16-mark question. This is the question where you have to compare the whole of source A to the whole of source B and look at the ideas and perspectives of the writers. Why make a change? Well, because this change is about comparing the methods. The examiners have realised that comparing the methods is a completely different skill to comparing the ideas and perspectives. In other words, they're asking the students to do contradictory things. So, they've stopped the contradiction and they've got rid of comparing the methods. Brilliant. Now you just have to comment on the methods. So this is a metaphor and it's successful because it makes the reader imagine that blah 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 about the author's perspective. That is now super easy. We can all comment on the methods, tick that off as we write and get our marks for our explanation of the writer's viewpoint, the writer's perspective. That is real English. The impact is the exam is more a real test of what it is to be a successful student than just being able to read the flipping question they've given us this year. Therefore, let's rate the whole of the changes in the exam. I'm giving them 4 stars. Well done-ish, AQA. And over the next few weeks, you better believe I'll be making videos about each question and giving you student answers under exam conditions in the description.